Chapter 1. The Man Who Shows Up. Rob Carson arrived at the office every weekday at 8:47 a.m., which gave him enough time to set his coffee down, boot his computer, and listen to the faint hum of the building wake itself up before 9 o'clock arrived and everyone pretended they hadn't been there already. He liked the quiet minutes best. The office wasn't remarkable. Beige walls, carpet tiles with a pattern chosen explicitly because stains didn't show, a break room whose refrigerator emitted a noise like a struggling small animal. Rob had been there for almost 6 years, long enough to know which floorboard near the printer squeaked, long enough that no one questioned whether he'd deliver on a deadline. He always did. Rob worked in operations, coordination, scheduling, making sure the parts that weren't glamorous moved when they were supposed to. He didn't manage people. He didn't give presentations unless someone else was sick. His name rarely appeared in emails with exclamation points, and that was exactly how he liked it. There was an invisible kind of power, he'd learned, in being relied upon quietly. Linda from accounting leaned over his cubicle wall just before 10. "You're a lifesaver," she said, already turning away. "The shipment issue? Fixed. I don't even know how you did it." Rob smiled at the spreadsheet on his screen. "It just needed a different contact," he said, though she was already gone. It was amazing what could be accomplished when nobody cared about taking credit. At lunch, Rob ate at his desk by choice, not habit. He liked the rhythm of it. Eat, skim an article, answer 2 emails, get back to it. Some people mistook that for isolation. It wasn't. Rob spoke to his coworkers, laughed when something was funny, remembered birthdays. He simply didn't orbit anyone. At 5 o'clock, he shut down his computer like he always did, decisive, no lingering tabs, and headed home. His apartment was clean in the way of someone who wasn't tidying for guests. No clutter, but no decorations chosen specifically to impress. A couch he found comfortable. A bookshelf that had been assembled slightly crooked but had not collapsed yet, which felt like a fair metaphor for most things. He cooked dinner most nights. That night it was pasta with vegetables he'd intended to roast more thoroughly than he did. While it cooked, he stood at the counter scrolling through messages from his parents. Dad had sent a picture of the grill. Mom had sent 3 texts about potato salad. "You coming home this weekend?" The last one read, like the question hadn't already been answered. Rob leaned against the counter, phone in hand, steam fogging the window over the sink. He hadn't been home for Independence Day in years. Too busy in college, too inconvenient afterward, too many polite excuses that were all technically true. But this year, when his mother mentioned it in passing, something in him hadn't resisted. It wasn't nostalgia. It wasn't longing. It was just time. Yeah, he typed. "Friday night." 3 dots appeared instantly. "We're so excited," his mother replied. Then, a second later, "A lot of people will be around." Rob paused, then typed back. "Okay." He wasn't worried. Rob didn't come apart at the thought of old streets or familiar faces. He didn't confuse memory with obligation. If he ran into someone, he'd say hello. If he didn't, that was fine too. Loneliness for Rob was like weather, present, occasionally unpleasant, never an emergency. He believed in experiencing things fully, even when they didn't pan out. If something caught his eye, a pottery class, a trivia night, a weekend trip, he tried it. Not because he expected revelation, but because nothing ever taught him less than staying still. Years ago, he'd believed love would be a constant, something inevitable. Fairy tales hadn't been loud in his life, but they'd been there, humming softly in the background. That belief had ended on a warm spring night under gymnasium lights. He didn't think about it often anymore. You could close a door without barricading it. Friday came quickly. Rob packed a duffel, watered his plant, just in case, and drove out of the city as dusk settled in. The road trip playlist he'd made years ago still worked. He didn't change it. Pulling into his parents' driveway felt like stepping into a photograph that hadn't aged but somehow still fit. The porch light buzzed. The wind chime clinked off rhythm. "Rob," his mother said, appearing before he'd even shut off the engine. She hugged him tightly. His father followed, clapping him on the shoulder like Rob was a project he'd done well enough on the first try. Inside, everything smelled like summer and something baking. Rob relaxed without effort. This place didn't ask anything from him. Over dinner, conversations overlapped. Neighbors, old coworkers who was married now who'd moved back. Rob listened more than he spoke, smiling where appropriate. "So," his mother said carefully, reaching for more bread, "your vacation timing worked out perfectly." Rob raised an eyebrow. "Did it?" "Well," she said, glancing at his father, "it's just nice. Everyone home." Everyone was not a word Rob liked in vague sentences. Still, he didn't push. He helped with dishes. He slept in his old room. The ceiling fan still made the same clicking sound, like it remembered him. The next afternoon, while standing in the yard handing his dad a wrench, Rob noticed the way his mother kept checking her watch. "Big plans?" he asked mildly. She smiled too quickly. "Just the holiday." Rob nodded and handed his father the wrench he hadn't actually needed. Whatever they were planning, Rob would meet it the same way he met most things. Present, calm, and willing to learn something new, even if it wasn't comfortable. After all, no experience came without a lesson. And Rob Carson had always paid attention. Chapter 2. Rooms that remember you. Rob woke up to sunlight slanting through the blinds and the familiar creak of the house settling into itself. For a few seconds, he lay still, listening. Somewhere downstairs, a cabinet closed. The coffee maker gurgled. His father's low voice floated up, indistinct but steady. Like narration to a documentary, he didn't need to see to know the ending. He sat up and swung his feet to the floor. The carpet felt the same. Threadbare by the door, softer near the bed. He hadn't realized how much his body remembered the place until it moved through it without instruction. Downstairs, his mother was humming as she moved between counter and stove. She handed him a mug the moment he entered the kitchen. No questions asked. "Sleep okay?" she asked, already turning back to the pan. "Yeah," Rob said. "Fan still clicks." His father smiled over the newspaper. "I keep meaning to fix that." "You've been meaning to fix it for 15 years, Rob said mildly. "And yet," his father replied, folding the paper, "you slept just fine." They ate breakfast together, unhurried. Outside, the neighborhood was already stirring. Lawnmowers in the distance. A kid riding past on a bike too big for him. Someone testing fireworks early and getting shouted at for it. "So," his mother said, sliding a plate into the sink, "a few people are getting together later. Thought you might want to stop by. Catch up." Rob sipped his coffee. "Who?" "Oh, you know," she said lightly. "Old friends. Neighbors." She said it the way people said weather, as if naming it more specifically would jinx the forecast. "I'll think about it," Rob replied, which was true. He didn't reject invitations out of reflex. He just didn't accept them on other people's momentum. He spent the morning helping his father in the garage, mostly holding things and handing over tools. It was the same kind of work Rob did best. Present, useful, observant without interfering. His father talked. Not in speeches, but drifting observations about the town, about who'd retired, who'd moved back. "It's strange," his father said at one point, tightening a bolt. "How fast people leave and how slowly they come back if they do it all." Rob nodded. He didn't supply commentary. Silence was allowed between them. It always had been. By early afternoon, Rob decided to walk downtown. The town hadn't changed so much as edited itself. A bookstore where the hardware store used to be. A cafe with too many chalkboard signs and not enough seating. The movie theater still had the same peeling marquee, albeit with newer letters. He ran into Mark Jensen outside the pharmacy. Mark, who used to sit behind him in English class, who now had a beard that tried a little too hard. "Rob," Mark said, blinking like he was seeing a ghost he wasn't afraid of. "Man, you look the same." "Local miracle," Rob said. "You too." "Mostly." They laughed, exchanged the quick version of their lives. Work, family, none of it tragic, none of it dazzling. Mark mentioned a barbecue later. "Yeah," Rob said. "I might swing by." People always accepted might from Rob. They'd learned it wasn't a dismissal, just honesty. As he walked, he noticed the houses where kids he'd known used to live. Some were empty now. Some had strangers' cars out front. He passed one porch where wind chimes tangled themselves in the breeze, sounding too eager. He didn't look toward Tammy Reynolds' old house. That wasn't resistance. It simply wasn't habit anymore. By the time he returned home, his mother was on the phone, her voice lowered but animated. She glanced up when he entered, then turned away slightly, as if proximity might transmit secrets. Rob went upstairs to change, pausing in his old room. The posters were gone, boxed away years ago, but he could still see their outlines in his mind. The desk by the window where he'd done homework and stared outside, thinking about what came next as if it were a place you could pack for. Downstairs, his father called up. "We're heading over to the Millers in an hour." Rob came down adjusted, neutral clothes, nothing that tried to broadcast success or retreat. Just himself. At the Millers, the backyard was already crowded. Tables laden with dishes. Coolers lined like sentries. He made his way through greetings, hugs offered then pulled back when people realized Rob wasn't a hugger, and never had been. He talked with a woman he vaguely remembered from his mother's book club. He helped an older man balance a wobbly chair. He listened more than he spoke, which made people feel unusually heard. That was when he noticed the looks. Not from one person, but from a pattern of glances that circled, collected, redirected. His mother and Mrs. Miller stood together near the drinks, their heads nearly touching. They looked up as one when Rob laughed at something Mark said. The coordination would have been impressive if it hadn't been transparent. "Do I have something on my face?" Rob asked Mark dryly. Mark followed his gaze and winced. "Oh, yeah, that. That what?" Mark hesitated, then shrugged. "You'll see." It wasn't long before his mother intercepted him with a bowl of something and an urgency she tried to disguise as enthusiasm. "Rob, there you are. Did you say hello to everyone?" "I believe so," he said. "Unless someone arrived during my conversation about rainfall averages." "Well," she said, steering him a few steps over, "there's someone I think you should—" "Oh!" The interruption came as a laugh cut through the air. Familiar, but worn by years Rob hadn't witnessed. Tammy Reynolds stood near the edge of the group, her hair pulled back loosely. A drink in hand, she wasn't actually drinking. She looked older in the way adults looked, Not diminished, just sharpened by experience. She turned, following his mother's line of sight, and froze. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Tammy smiled. It was reflexive, friendly. The same smile she used to give strangers she intended to be kind to. "Rob," she said. "Wow." "Hi, Tammy," he replied. There was no emotional spike, no sudden ache, just recognition. His mother beamed as if she had personally orchestrated the seasons. "You two know each other, of course." "Yeah," Tammy said quickly. "We grew up next door." Rob nodded. "We did." A beat passed, the kind of pause people rushed to fill unless they were comfortable letting things exist as they were. Tammy wasn't. "I didn't know you were in town," she said. "I got in last night." "Oh," she said. "That's great." It didn't sound like a question or a declaration. It just sounded noted. "Well," his mother said brightly, "I'm going to grab more napkins. Don't go anywhere." She vanished. Tammy let out a small breath and laughed, tipping her head back slightly. "They've been talking about you." "That's alarming," Rob said evenly. She smiled again, smaller this time. "They missed you." "That sounds more accurate." They stood side by side, watching the yard. It wasn't awkward exactly, just undefined. "So," Tammy said, "what do you do now?" "Operations," Rob said. "Office job. I like it." "That's good," she said, surprised at the certainty. "You always liked making things work." He shrugged. "Someone has to." She studied him briefly, then looked away. "I always wondered." The sentence stopped there, unfinished. Tammy frowned slightly, as if losing her place in a thought she'd rehearsed too often. Rob waited. "Well," she said finally, "it's really good to see you." "You too," he said, and meant it in the simplest way possible. Across the yard, their mothers watched, hopeful as spectators mistaking politeness for momentum. Rob saw it now clearly. Whatever assumptions had been made, whatever plans were unfolding, they were built on silence that had lasted too long to still belong to either of them. He took another breath, steady as ever. This weekend, he realized, wasn't going to be about nostalgia after all. It was going to be about old stories finally being told, and whether they still mattered once they were. Chapter 3. The unplanned reunion. The planning meeting was supposed to be casual. That was how it had been described to Rob anyway, just coffee and details, his mother had said, which meant folding tables, responsibilities, and spirited opinions disguised as suggestions. It took place the next morning at the community center, a squat brick building that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and institutional memory. Rob arrived 5 minutes early out of habit and found a seat near the back, where he could observe without being recruited into anything he hadn't volunteered for. People filtered in gradually. Paper cups of coffee, clipboards already half filled, an enthusiasm that had nowhere urgent to go. The 4th of July celebration was an annual tradition, and like all traditions, it thrived on the belief that if everyone did their part exactly as they always had, something meaningful would occur. Rob listened as discussions overlapped: food signups, firework permits, who was in charge of cleanup this year. He raised his hand once to point out a scheduling overlap no one else had noticed. The issue resolved itself without fanfare. "Good catch," someone said. Rob nodded and went back to listening. He felt Tammy before he saw her. Not in a mystical way, just in the subtle shift of attention when a familiar energy enters a room. She arrived late, apologizing quietly as she slipped into an empty chair 2 rows ahead of him. This morning she wore jeans and a soft blue shirt, her hair loose around her shoulders. No dramatic entrance, no moment anyone else noticed. Rob did. She glanced around as if orienting herself, then turned slightly and caught his eye. This time, her smile didn't come automatically. "Hey," she mouthed, barely audible but unmistakable. Rob lifted a hand in greeting. "Hey." They returned their focus to the front of the room, but awareness lingered, like sitting beside a radio turned just low enough to forget it was playing. The meeting dragged in the way all consensus-based gatherings did. Rob tracked decisions without judging them, noting which ones would be revisited later whether people acknowledged it or not. At the halfway point, a woman with an overconfident pen announced, "We'll break into smaller groups to finalize tasks." There it was. Chairs scraped. People shifted. Names were called out, some by coincidence, some by intent so obvious Rob almost admired the audacity of it. "Tammy Reynolds," the woman said, "and Rob Carson. You two can handle logistics for the street booths." Rob closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, then opened them. Tammy turned around in her chair, eyebrows raised in muted surprise. "Well," she said, half smiling, "guess we're a team." "So it seems," Rob replied. They moved to a side table stacked with maps and outdated flyers. The assignment was simple: placement, timing, access points. Manageable. Neutral. They stood across from each other at first, each glancing at the papers as if hoping the other would speak first. Tammy broke the silence. "I didn't know your mom was so invested," she said carefully. "She usually isn't," Rob replied, scanning the map, "which suggests coordination." Tammy laughed softly. "That tracks." They worked for a few minutes in companionable quiet, comparing notes. It was easy in an unsettling way, the rhythm of collaboration coming back faster than either of them likely expected. You always did like smoothing things out, Tammy said, tracing a route with her finger, making sure nothing fell apart. Rob looked up. I still do. That's good, she said, then hesitated. I think. He didn't respond immediately. He wasn't offended, just aware. Do you live nearby? She asked after a moment, attempting neutrality. No, Rob said. About 3 hours away. City. She nodded. Work? Yeah. I always imagined you'd end up doing something complicated, she said. This time, Rob smiled. It was small but genuine. It is. Just not loud about it. She considered that. I think I used to mistake loud for important. He met her gaze, curious but not defensive. What do you think now? Tammy didn't answer right away. Instead, she folded a flyer and set it aside. I think, she said slowly, I'm not always sure what I thought I knew. They finished their task efficiently. When they returned to the group, the energy had shifted. The mothers watched from opposite corners of the room, too pleased with themselves to hide it. As people packed up, Tammy lingered, clearly uncertain whether to leave immediately or engage longer. So, she said, adjusting her bag, are you going to the fireworks tonight? Probably, Rob said. My parents will go. She smiled. Mine too, apparently. A beat passed. If you want, Tammy added, we could walk around, catch up. No pressure. Rob studied her, not suspicious, just attentive. He noted the difference between invitation and assumption. It mattered. Okay, he said. That sounds fine. Her relief was fleeting but visible. Great. They parted ways then, no grand promise exchanged. Rob didn't dwell on it. He helped stack chairs. He carried boxes out back without being asked. That evening, the town gathered again near the riverbank, fireworks equipment silhouetted against the sky. Rob stood beside his parents, nodding to people he half recognized. Tammy approached just as the sun dipped low, her parents pausing a respectful distance away. Ready? She asked. Rob glanced at his mother, who was failing brilliantly at pretending not to watch. Yeah, he said. They walked toward the food stalls, the sound of conversation swelling and fading as they moved. Do you ever think about high school? Tammy asked abruptly. Rob considered the question. Rarely. It was a long time ago. Same, she said too quickly, then softer. Except sometimes. They stopped near a lemonade stand. The queue was long enough to justify standing still, short enough that conversation had to keep moving. I didn't expect to see you, Tammy admitted. Not really. I didn't expect to be here, Rob said honestly. She smiled. Fair. Another pause. She leaned against the table, fingers tracing condensation on her cup. My mom says I disappeared back then, Tammy said. After prom. Rob breathed in, steady. You did. She winced, not dramatically, but enough. I didn't mean to. I know, he replied. She looked at him then. Really looked. I don't think I ever asked how that night was for you. Rob met her gaze, calm and unmoving. No, he said. You didn't. The line moved. Firecrackers popped somewhere early. The sky deepened into indigo. I'm not asking now, Tammy said quickly. Not yet. I just wanted to say I realize that matters. Rob nodded. The acknowledgement landed heavier than apology would have. That does matter, he said. They got their drinks and moved on. Conversation lightening again, but something foundational had shifted. Not repaired. Exposed. Above them, fireworks began to bloom. Color against dark, loud and temporary and beautiful. Rob watched them without losing awareness of the person beside him. He felt no rush, no wish to reclaim the past. Just the quiet sense that this story, long assumed finished, still had chapters left to write, if handled carefully. And Rob Carson had always believed in doing things carefully, especially when they mattered. Chapter 4. Mothers with Theories. The morning after the fireworks, Rob woke to the sound of voices downstairs. His mother's and someone else's, the cadence unmistakably conspiratorial. He didn't move at first. The house had that specific holiday after quiet, where everything felt temporarily suspended, like the pause between innings. He lay there, staring at the ceiling fan as it ticked through its uneven rotation, and accepted what he already knew. This was not going to be a passive visit. Down in the kitchen, coffee cups clinked. A chair scraped. The other voice laughed. A short, decisive sound Rob recognized as Linda Reynolds's, Tammy's mother. He hadn't heard it in years, but some sounds had long half-lives. When Rob finally came down, the two women paused mid-sentence. Morning, he said. Good morning, his mother chirped, entirely too cheerful. Linda Reynolds smiled at him. The smile of a woman who had spent decades believing she knew how stories were supposed to go, and had recently discovered a chapter was missing. Look at you, she said. All grown up. Rob inclined his head. So I've heard. They made room for him at the table, though neither woman resumed her conversation. The silence stretched, waited. Rob poured himself coffee and waited. He'd learned long ago that interrupting only delayed the inevitable. Well, Linda said at last, folding her hands neatly. We ran into Tammy this morning. Rob took a sip. That happens. At the corner of his eye, he saw his mother wince, just slightly. Linda pressed on. She mentioned she talked to you last night. Yes, Rob said. We walked around. And? His mother prompted. Rob set the mug down carefully. And it was fine. The word landed and stopped there, solidly doing its job. Linda exchanged a look with Rob's mother. One that carried decades of shared PDA meetings and speculative optimism. You two were inseparable once, she said. Yes. And then, his mother added gently, you weren't. Rob nodded. Also true. Linda leaned forward. It never made sense. Rob met her gaze calmly. Things don't have to make sense to everyone. There it was. The first crack in the pleasant veneer. His mother tried to soften it. We just always assumed. That's the problem with assumptions, Rob said without heat. They don't require evidence. Silence fell again, thicker this time. Somewhere outside, a lawnmower sputtered and died. Linda sat back, studying him. Tammy didn't know you were leaving for college, she said. Rob's jaw tightened just perceptibly. I know. She said you didn't say goodbye. I did, Rob replied. I said see you around. That's not the same thing. No, he agreed. It isn't. His mother reached out, touching his arm. Rob, honey? He looked at her then. Really looked. You wanted me to come home, he said quietly. I'm home. If you have a question, ask it. Linda drew a breath, as if steadying herself. Did something happen between you and Tammy? Rob didn't answer immediately. He didn't deflect either. He considered the question as if it were a proposal with far-reaching implications. Yes, he said finally. Their attention sharpened. What? His mother asked. Time, Rob replied. Perspective. A realization. Linda frowned. That's not. You asked if something happened, Rob said. That's my answer. Linda's disappointment was immediate and familiar. It was the look of someone whose narrative had stalled. She always thought, Linda began slowly, that you were just busy, or drifting, that maybe you needed space. Rob nodded. I did. From her? His mother asked. Yes. The word echoed. His mother's expression shifted. Not alarmed, but unsettled. Well, Linda said briskly, recovering. Maybe now that you're both older you can talk it out. Clear the air. Rob pushed his chair back slightly. We already are, he said. In present tense. Linda's eyebrows pulled together. You're still holding on to something. Rob stood. He didn't tower, didn't loom. He simply occupied his space without apology. I'm holding on to clarity, he said. Those aren't the same thing. He grabbed his keys from the counter. I'm going to take a walk. Rob, his mother started. I'll be back, he assured her. I just prefer conversations when everyone says what they mean. Outside, the air was humid, heavy with the aftermath of celebration. Crepe paper littered the grass like shed skins. Rob walked without a destination for a while, letting his pace settle into something familiar. He passed the park where he and Tammy had once spent entire afternoons, lying in the grass, trading stories they hadn't known were half-invented. He didn't stop. The past didn't need reenactment. When he circled back, his phone buzzed. Tammy, are you busy? He considered the question. He wasn't. But he also wouldn't be if he said no. Availability was a choice. Rob, not particularly. A minute later, Tammy, want to grab coffee? He replied with the address of the cafe downtown. They arrived within minutes of each other. The coincidence unremarkable. Tammy looked tense, jaw set too carefully. Hi, she said. Hey, Rob replied. They ordered and sat at a small table by the window. For a moment, they watched people pass. Strollers, dogs, a man wearing a commemorative t-shirt he hadn't earned yet. Did my mom talk to you? Tammy asked. Indirectly, Rob said. She grimaced. She talked to me too. Rob waited. She thinks we left things unfinished, Tammy said, voice low. Like there was some misunderstanding. And do you? Rob asked. She hesitated. I never asked questions I assumed I already knew the answers to. Rob nodded once. That's honest. She wrapped her hands around her coffee. I didn't realize how much everyone expected us to become something. They still do, Rob said. Tammy let out a breath that bordered on a laugh. I know. It's suffocating. They sat with that for a moment. Can I ask you something? Tammy said. You just did, Rob replied, a glint of dry humor softening the edge. She smiled briefly, then sobered. Why didn't you try to talk to me back then? Rob didn't answer right away. He looked at her face, the earnestness, the uncertainty. It deserved care. Because I was paying attention, he said. Her brow furrowed. To what? To where I fit, Rob said. And where I didn't. Tammy swallowed. I wish I'd noticed. I believe you, he said. But wishing doesn't change things retroactively. She nodded, eyes down. No, it doesn't. Silence settled again. But this time it wasn't sharp. It was thoughtful. My mom thinks if we talk it all out, Tammy said quietly, everything can reset. Rob leaned back, considering. It can't, he said gently. But some things can still move forward. Tammy looked up at him then, searching. Do you want that? I want honesty, Rob replied. Wherever it leads. She exhaled slowly, as if that answer had both reassured and challenged her. Then maybe, she said, we should talk. Really talk. No parents. No expectations. Rob met her gaze, steady as ever. Okay. Outside the cafe window, clouds rolled in slowly, promising a storm that hadn't decided whether to break. Inside, two people sat across from each other. Not as roles or memories, but as adults finally approaching the center of a story that had been paused for far too long. And Rob knew, with calm certainty, that when the truth came out, it would not be loud. It would simply be said. Chapter 5. The truth said aloud. They chose the park at the edge of town because it was neutral ground. Not the places they grew up in, not anywhere weighted with implied meaning. Just a bench near the walking path, shaded by trees that didn't care who sat beneath them. Rob arrived first, as he almost always did. He stood for a moment instead of sitting, hands in his pockets, watching a jogger pass, then an older couple moving at a pace that suggested intention rather than urgency. When Tammy approached from the opposite direction, he noticed she'd slowed, as if calibrating herself before stepping fully into the moment. Hi, she said. Hi, Rob replied. They sat. Space between them, but not defensive. Just room to breathe. For a minute, neither spoke. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable but dense, like clouds before rain. My mom cornered you, Tammy said at last. Not a question. Yes, Rob said. Yours and mine. Separately. Very coordinated. She winced despite herself. I was afraid of that. It wasn't dramatic, Rob added. Just persistent. Tammy laughed softly, a humorless sound. That checks out. She folded her hands in her lap, then unfolded them, then folded them again. I don't want this conversation to be something we do because they pushed us into it, she said. If that's what this is, we shouldn't. It isn't, Rob said evenly. We agreed to talk. That's a choice. She nodded, relief flickering across her face. Okay. Another pause. Longer this time. Tammy took a breath, let it out slowly. They asked me what went wrong, she said. I didn't have an answer. Not a real one. Rob leaned back slightly, resting his forearms on his thighs. I assumed that. Her eyes flicked to his. That sounds colder than you mean it, doesn't it? Probably, he said. But it's not anger. It's acknowledgement. She swallowed. So what went wrong? There it was. Plainly stated. No theatrics. Rob didn't rush. He'd waited years without knowing he was waiting. A few seconds more would not hurt. We grew up together, he began. We were constants. Neighbors. Defaults. Tammy smiled faintly. We were. And somewhere along the way, Rob continued, I stopped being someone you chose and became someone you used. Her smile faded. She didn't interrupt. I don't say that accusingly, he added. I didn't notice it at first either. It happened slowly. She looked down at her hands. I never thought of you that way. I know, Rob said. That's part of it. He shifted slightly, grounding himself. Prom night was just the moment it became clear. Tammy's shoulders tightened. I know that night haunts you. It doesn't, Rob said calmly. It clarified me. She looked up, startled. That sounds healthier than you expect? Rob offered. She nodded. I went to that prom knowing exactly what I was going to say to you, he continued, voice level, unembellished. Not a confession designed to corner you. Just honesty. I was done pretending I didn't want more. Tammy closed her eyes briefly. Rob, I'm not finished, he said gently. She nodded. Okay. When you arrived with someone else, he said, and thanked me for being a good friend, I understood something I hadn't let myself understand before. You liked my presence, my availability. You liked what I gave. But not me. That isn't true, she said automatically. Rob turned his head slightly, meeting her gaze. Not confrontational, just present. I believe you didn't mean it that way, he said. But meaning isn't the same as impact. Tammy pressed her lips together, the reflexive defense giving way to thought. I realized then, Rob said, that I had become a utility. I showed up. I listened. I supported. And because I never asked for anything, you never had to consider whether you wanted to give something back. She inhaled sharply, as if the words had finally landed. So I stopped, Rob said simply. I stopped offering myself to someone who didn't know they were receiving me. The air between them felt altered, heavier, but clearer. That's why I didn't chase you, he continued. Why I didn't follow up. You didn't lose me suddenly. You just stopped seeing me because I stepped out of the role you were used to. Tammy's eyes were bright now, not with tears exactly, but with an emotion searching for shape. I didn't know you felt that way, she whispered. I know, Rob replied. And you never told me. No. Why? Rob considered her question carefully. Because wanting someone to see you isn't the same as forcing them to, he said. And I didn't want love that only existed because I demanded it. She stared at him, understanding dawning slowly, painfully. I thought you drifted, Tammy said. I thought you got bored with me. Rob shook his head. I left so I wouldn't disappear entirely. The words hung between them, undeniable. Tammy covered her mouth with one hand, then dropped it again, visibly unsettled. I owe you an apology. Rob studied her face, the sincerity, the regret. He chose his response with equal care. You don't owe me guilt, he said. You owed me awareness back then. That window closed. Her face crumpled briefly, then steadied. I wish I'd asked, she said. Even once. I know, Rob said, and he meant it. He could feel the truth of her regret now. That was new. They sat in silence, longer this time. It wasn't dead air. It was recalibration. I didn't realize how entitled I was to you, Tammy said finally. To your constancy. Rob nodded. A lot of people confuse familiarity with permission. She let out a shaky laugh. That sounds like you. He smiled faintly. I've had time to think. So, Tammy said after a moment, voice careful. What does this mean now? Rob didn't answer immediately. He looked at the path, at the people passing, moving forward at their chosen speeds. It means, he said at last, that whatever happens next can't be about fixing the past. Only about choosing the present. She considered that. And do you choose this? Us talking, I mean. Yes, Rob said without hesitation. Even knowing it might not lead anywhere? Especially then. Tammy exhaled, something unclenching in her expression. I don't want to treat you like a role ever again. I won't allow it, Rob said gently. That's not a threat. It's a boundary. She nodded. That's fair. They sat there a while longer, not trying to force resolution. The truth had been spoken. It didn't need immediate answers. When Tammy stood, she hesitated. Thank you, she said, for telling me, even when you didn't have to. Rob rose as well. I did have to, he said. For myself. She smiled, sad and sincere, and something else beginning beneath it. They walked back toward town together. Not touching, not distant. Just aligned. Behind them, the bench sat empty beneath the trees, holding a conversation that had finally been finished. Not with blame or drama, but with clarity earned over years of quiet observation. And Rob Carson felt something shift. Not hope exactly, but space. Sometimes that was where genuine things began. Chapter 6. Aftershocks. The change didn't announce itself with fireworks or declarations. It leaked into the days that followed, subtle but persistent, like water finding a new path. Rob noticed it first in the way Tammy began to hesitate before speaking, then chose her words more carefully instead of smoothing things over with habit. He noticed it in himself too, the absence of that faint alertness he'd always felt around her, the sense that he needed to be useful to justify his presence. That hum had gone quiet. It was restful. After their conversation at the park, they didn't immediately see each other again. Not out of avoidance, but out of respect for the space they'd created. Rob spent the day helping his parents prepare for a small cookout, running errands, fixing a loose hinge without being asked. Life resumed its ordinary pace, but he felt aligned in it, not slightly askew as he'd grown used to feeling back here. That evening, as he stood at the sink washing his hands, his phone buzzed. Tammy, are you around tonight? Rob considered the question. He was. He always had been. The difference now was that he answered consciously. Rob, yeah. What's up? Pause, longer than before. Tammy, my parents went to a movie. I was thinking about going for a walk. No pressure. He smiled faintly at the phrasing. Rob, sure. River path. Tammy, that works. Twilight had already begun its slow claiming of the sky when they met, the air cooler than it had been earlier, easier to breathe. Tammy wore a light jacket she kept adjusting, as if unsure whether it belonged on or off. They started walking without deciding a direction, footsteps sinking naturally. A heron lifted from the water nearby, wings broad and deliberate. I keep replaying our conversation, Tammy said after a few minutes, not nervously, thoughtfully. That's exhausting, Rob replied lightly. Do you need a distraction? She smiled, grateful. Maybe later. They walked a little farther. I didn't realize how much of myself I built around being needed, Tammy continued. Not just with you, with everyone. Rob nodded. People often confuse being relied on with being seen. She glanced at him. You always did have a way of saying things that landed exactly where I didn't want them. That's my secret skill, he said. Targeted discomfort. She laughed. Real laughter this time, not reflexive. It startled her enough that she stopped walking for a moment. That's new, she said. What is? That I can laugh without immediately worrying if you're okay. Or if I said the right thing. Or if I need to fill the space. Rob turned to face her fully. You don't need to manage me anymore. I know, she said softly. I'm just learning what that feels like. They resumed walking, slower now. So, Tammy said, tucking her hands into her pockets. What do you want, Rob? Not from me, just in general. He considered the question as if it were a practical problem rather than a philosophical trap. I want things that are mutual, he said. Interest, effort, affection. I want to be chosen, not assumed. She nodded. That makes sense. It's also not revolutionary, he added. Just difficult for people who are used to convenience. Tammy winced in agreement. You're not wrong. They reached a bench overlooking the river and sat. The water reflected the fading light in broken streaks, never still long enough to be owned. I don't know where this goes, Tammy said. And I don't want you to think I'm asking you to wait for me to figure it out. Rob leaned back, resting his hands on the bench behind him. I'm not waiting, he said. I'm walking. You're welcome to walk with me. Or not. She exhaled slowly, as if relieved by the clarity. That might be the healthiest thing anyone's ever said to me. He smiled. Low bar, but I'll take it. They sat in companionable quiet for a while, not pressing for intimacy or resolution. When they eventually stood, Tammy hesitated again, less unsure, more intentional. Can I ask you something else? She said. Of course. Are you lonely? The question wasn't probing or pitying, just curious. Rob didn't dodge it. Sometimes, he said, but not in a way that makes me reckless. She smiled, admiration flickering. I like that. I know. She laughed again, head tipping back. You really do. They parted with an easy goodbye. No promises, no tension in the air afterward. Over the next couple of days, they crossed paths naturally. A shared errand for their parents. A casual run-in at the cafe. Each interaction carried a new rhythm. Lighter, more deliberate. One afternoon, Tammy found Rob in the garage with his father, sorting tools. Hey, she said, leaning against the doorframe. Your mom asked if you could help carry tables later. Rob glanced up. Sure. Tammy lingered. I can help too, if that's okay. Rob studied her, sensing the subtext. I'd like that, he said. As long as we're actually helping, not just hovering. She grinned. Deal. They carried tables, worked in sync without slipping into old patterns. Tammy noticed when Rob lifted his share without comment. Rob noticed when Tammy asked before rearranging things. Small things, significant things. That evening, as they sat with lemonade on the porch steps, Tammy turned to him, expression open but serious. I don't want to lose you again, she said. Not because of avoidance or assumption. Rob looked at the yard, at the quiet settling in like a blanket. Then don't, he said simply. But understand, that means wanting me, not what I provide. She held his gaze. I do want you, she said. And I'm okay if you don't believe that yet. I don't disbelieve it, Rob replied. I'm just letting actions catch up to words. That's fair, she said. I deserve that kind of patience. He smiled softly. So do I. A breeze rattled the porch wind chimes, off rhythm and familiar. Nothing was fixed. Nothing was promised. But something had shifted from impact to motion, and both of them felt it. The aftershocks weren't destructive. They were instructive. And Rob Carson, steady as ever, kept walking forward. This time with the sense that someone beside him wasn't just there by habit, but by choice. Chapter 7. Trying, not fixing. If there was one thing Rob had learned the hard way, it was the difference between effort and repair. Effort was forward-facing. Repair implied something broken. So when Tammy knocked on his parents' door the next afternoon holding a bag of groceries and an expression that suggested she was bracing herself for rejection, Rob met her with the same calm consideration he brought to most things. You don't have to do this, he said, stepping aside to let her in. I know, she replied. That's why I want to. They set the groceries down on the kitchen counter. His mother, who had been pretending to read at the table while listening intently to the sound of voices, looked up with poorly disguised delight. Oh, Tammy, she said. You're just in time. We were about to start chopping. Rob reached for a knife. I've got it. Tammy paused. Old instinct nudged. Then she caught herself. I can help if you want, she said deliberately. Rob met her eyes. Sure, let's split it. It was a small thing, and yet both of them noticed. They worked side by side, not falling into the old rhythm automatically, but building a new one, checking in, exchanging glances, not assuming coordination but allowing it to happen. What made you decide to come over? Rob asked quietly as they sliced peppers. Tammy shrugged. I wanted to do something uncomplicated. Something that didn't feel like a conversation. This counts as uncomplicated? He asked, gesturing with his knife toward his mother, who was now gushing about a neighbor's new pergola. Tammy smiled. Compared to my usual internal monologue? Absolutely. They finished prepping, then retreated to the porch with cold drinks while the grill heated up. The day was warm but not oppressive, the kind of summer afternoon that asked very little of you beyond presence. I talked to my mom, Tammy said after a bit. Rob raised an eyebrow. Voluntarily. Yes, she said dryly. It was illuminating. I can imagine. She's disappointed, Tammy admitted. Not in you. In the story not lining up. Rob leaned back in his chair. Stories rarely survive comparison with reality. Tammy nodded. She kept saying, but you were perfect for each other. And that's when you remembered she wasn't there for most of it, Rob said. Her mouth twitched. Exactly. They sat with that, the breeze rattling the wind chimes overhead in their familiar, slightly off-tempo way. Can I tell you something without you taking it as pressure? Tammy asked. I'll try, Rob said. I don't want to redo, Tammy said. I don't want to fix anything we didn't finish back then. I want to know who you are now. On purpose. Rob studied her face, the openness in it. That's the only version available, he said. So that works. She smiled, relieved. Good. They spent the afternoon drifting between conversations. Light, observational, occasionally sharp-edged in the way real humor tended to be. Tammy teased Rob about his meticulous grocery lists. Rob countered by pointing out that she'd rearranged the same items 3 times before deciding they were fine where they were. That evening, when they found themselves alone again in the kitchen as dishes stacked up, Tammy dried while Rob washed. This feels surprisingly normal, she said. It is normal, Rob replied. It just isn't habitual yet. She glanced at him, then back to the plates. I keep waiting for myself to fall into old patterns, to start leaning. And, he asked. And I don't really want to, she admitted. It turns out I like standing next to someone instead of on them. He smiled at that. Later, as dusk settled in, they walked the block. Not the river path this time, but the ordinary stretch of sidewalk near their old houses. Tammy slowed as they approached the space between where their childhood homes had once been neighbors. It's weird, she said. This doesn't hurt the way I expected. That's growth, Rob said. Pain that no longer fits. She nodded. Do you ever think about what might have happened if we talked sooner? Rob stopped walking then, turning to face her fully. No, he said, because that version of us didn't know how to choose well yet. She searched his face. And this version? This version is trying, he said. Not fixing. Trying. Tammy smiled, soft and real. I can do trying. They resumed walking, steps in easy sync, not unconsciously but willingly. For the first time in a long while, Rob felt something unfamiliar but welcome. The sense that forward momentum didn't require him to carry more than his share. And that was the kind of comedy life offered quietly, when effort was shared and no one was keeping score. Chapter 8. Choice over convenience. The invitation came the morning Rob was supposed to leave. It wasn't dramatic. No urgent knock, no flurry of texts. Just a note left on the kitchen counter in Tammy's careful handwriting, placed where he'd see it while pouring coffee. If you're free before you head out, I'd like to talk. No expectations. T. Rob read it once, then again, not because it required interpretation but because tone mattered. He appreciated that she'd written no expectations. It meant she was learning the language of choice as diligently as he'd learned restraint. He folded the note and slipped it into his pocket. I'm stepping out for a bit, he told his parents, grabbing his keys. His mother looked up too quickly. Oh, I'll be back before I go, he said, gentle but firm. She nodded, chastened, and returned to fussing with a casserole that didn't need her attention. Tammy was waiting at the small lake just beyond town. The one people forgot about because it didn't have a dock or a trailhead. Just water and grass and the occasional duck that looked mildly insulted to be there. She sat on the hood of her car, arms folded loosely, staring out at the surface of the lake as if it might answer her questions for her. Hey, Rob said as he approached. She turned, relief flickering across her face before she reined it in. Hey, thanks for coming. Of course. They didn't sit right away. They stood side by side instead, both oriented toward the water like witnesses rather than participants. I didn't sleep much, Tammy admitted. That makes one of us, Rob said. I tend to sleep better once things are named. She smiled ruefully. I'm still getting used to that. She took a breath, steadying herself. I asked you here because I needed to say something without my parents in the room. Or the past doing the talking for me. Rob inclined his head. I'm listening. I realized something last night, she continued, about why it took me so long to really hear what you said. He waited. I've spent most of my life letting things happen to me if they were easy, Tammy said. Relationships included. If someone showed up, I assumed that meant something was working. I didn't stop to ask if I was showing up in return. Rob nodded slowly. That aligns with my observations. She laughed softly at that. Not defensive, just accepting. I know it does. She turned to face him fully now, expression open in a way that made it impossible to mistake for nostalgia or habit. I don't want you because you're familiar, Tammy said. And I don't want you because everyone else thinks we make sense. Rob met her gaze, calm and unwavering. What do you want, then? I want, she said carefully, to choose you, actively. But only if that choice doesn't put you in the position of waiting or hoping or carrying both sides. He let the silence sit between them, testing the weight of her words. That's a considerate offer, Rob said. But choice isn't something you make once. I know, Tammy said quickly. I mean, I'm learning. I don't want a guarantee. I want to practice. Rob felt something ease in his chest, not opening all at once, but loosening. That's closer to what I value. She nodded. I also need to say something harder. Go ahead. If you say no, Tammy said, I'll understand. Not as a rejection of who I am now, but as a boundary you're allowed to keep. Rob studied her face, searching for any trace of expectation masked as humility. He didn't find it. That matters, he said quietly. They walked a few steps along the water, movement helping to settle the gravity of what was being said. I don't want to stay here, Tammy added. In this town, I'm thinking about moving. Not because I'm running, but because I don't want my life narrated by people who remember me at 17. Rob smiled at that. That's a reasonable impulse. I wanted you to know, she said. Because whatever this is, it can't be built on proximity alone. Agreed, Rob said. Convenience isn't commitment. She laughed lightly, then sobered. So, what happens now? Rob stopped walking and turned toward her. He didn't rush the words. He didn't soften them unnecessarily. What happens now, he said, is that I leave this afternoon. I go back to my life. You stay here a little longer or not. We don't rush toward something because it feels meaningful right now. Tammy's shoulders relaxed rather than drooped. That, Rob noted, was important. And? She asked. And if you want to keep choosing me, he continued, you do it when it costs you something. Time, tension, effort. She nodded. And if you don't feel chosen anymore? Then I'll say so, Rob said. I don't disappear. That's part of what I'm offering. Tammy's eyes shone. Not with tears, but with recognition. That might be the bravest thing I've ever heard you say. He smiled faintly. I've said braver things to quieter audiences. She laughed, then took a steadying breath. I want to try, she said. Not because I'm lonely, because I'm awake. Rob considered her carefully. This was the moment where choice could tilt toward belief or restraint. I'm willing, he said finally, to keep the door open, not because of history, because of how you're showing up now. Tammy let out a breath she'd clearly been holding. Thank you. For clarity, Rob added. Not for anything else. She stepped closer, not touching, but aligning herself with him. Can I ask how you're feeling? Rob considered honestly. Grounded, he said, cautiously optimistic, and still myself. Good, she said. I don't want to be the reason you change into someone smaller. You won't be, he replied. I won't allow that. They stood there a moment longer, the lake reflecting the sky without trying to hold it. When Rob finally turned away toward his car, Tammy walked with him. No big goodbye, she said. Just, see you. Rob opened the door, then paused. See you, he said. And Tammy? Yes. Thank you for meeting me where I am, he said. Not where you remember me. She smiled, warm and steady. That's the only place I want to meet you. As he drove away later that afternoon, Rob felt the familiar sensation of departure, but without the old sense of unfinished business weighing it down. Some stories ended when you left town. Others began when you chose how to carry them forward. And for the first time, Rob Carson wasn't carrying possibility alone. Chapter 10. What lasts? The thing about stability Rob had learned was that it didn't announce itself when it arrived. It revealed itself later, when something unexpected happened and you didn't panic, didn't scramble, didn't lose yourself in reaction. It revealed itself in how you responded. The test came on a Tuesday night that should have been ordinary. Rob was halfway through reheating leftovers when his phone buzzed with Tammy's name. No emojis. No preamble. Tammy, can we talk tonight? Rob paused, fork in hand. He checked himself, not for fear, but for anticipation. Nothing tight. Nothing braced. Rob, yes. Want to come over? A minute passed. Tammy, maybe a walk first? Rob, okay. I'll meet you downstairs. They walked the neighborhood instead of the park. Streetlights hummed. A dog barked once, then quieted. Tammy had her hands in her jacket pockets, shoulders slightly forward, walking with intention rather than urgency. I got an offer, she said as they crossed a quiet intersection. Rob didn't interrupt. A job. Another city. Not a dramatic distance, but not close either. He nodded, absorbing. How do you feel about it? She glanced at him, visibly relieved by the question. Interested, not desperate, which feels new. That's good, Rob said. What's making it complicated? She breathed in deeply. Us. He stopped walking, not abruptly but decisively, and turned to face her. Say what you're thinking, not what you're afraid of. She smiled faintly. Right? I'm not asking you to follow me. I'm not asking you to wait. I just don't want to pretend you're not a factor. Rob considered the street, the quiet, the steadiness he felt standing there. I appreciate that, he said. I don't want to be minimized to make decisions easier. You aren't, Tammy said immediately. You're part of my actual calculus. That's all I need, he replied. They resumed walking. So what do you want? She asked after a moment. Not as an answer to me, just in your life. Rob smiled slightly. I want what holds up under movement. She looked at him. That might be the most you've ever sounded like yourself. I've been practicing. They reached his building and sat on the front steps, the city moving quietly around them. I don't want promises that depend on geography, Rob continued. I don't want fear dressed up as loyalty. If you take the job because it's right for you, I'll respect that. And us? He looked at her, steady. If this continues to work because we choose each other, not because it's easy, then distance becomes a logistics problem, not a moral one. Tammy exhaled. I was afraid you'd think I was pulling away. Rob shook his head. You're checking in. That's the opposite. She laughed softly, then leaned her head against his shoulder. Not seeking reassurance, just being there. She took the job. Not dramatically, not with declarations, just with intention. They adjusted. Calendars, trains, long calls and short texts that carried weight because they weren't overused. Visits that felt like presence instead of escape. There were hard weeks, misfires, a missed call that mattered more than either had expected. A conversation that stretched past midnight because it needed to. And through it all, Rob remained himself. He showed up. He named when something felt off instead of recalibrating silently. Tammy learned to ask rather than assume, to offer rather than lean, to choose him not as a default but as a person. One evening, nearly a year later, they sat on opposite ends of a bench at a train platform, legs stretched out, bags at their feet. Tammy watched people rushing past. You know, she said, we don't look like a love story. Rob smiled. Good. She turned to him. You don't want that? I want a real one, he said. Stories end. This just keeps adapting. She considered him, then nodded. I used to think love needed spectators. And now I think it needs maintenance, she said. And fairness. He bumped her foot gently with his. You're learning fast. Later that night, in Rob's apartment, they cooked dinner together. No music, just conversation threading in and out as they moved around each other with ease. Tammy set plates down and paused. I don't ever need to be the only thing in your life, she said. Just something you choose to make space for. Rob looked at her, really looked. That, he said, is exactly how I love. She smiled, not triumphant, not relieved, just sure. Rob Carson never became someone who chased the spotlight. He never made grand speeches about fate or timing. He didn't believe love redeemed the past or solved loneliness entirely. But he believed in effort without scorekeeping, in presence without ownership, in choosing someone again and again without needing applause. And when Tammy chose him, clearly, deliberately, without needing him to disappear into usefulness, Rob didn't need to say much at all. He just took her hand. Not because it completed a story, but because it was where his hand belonged.